In this video, I will show you how to implement the user registration, authentication, and authorization using Spring Boot, Spring MVC, Spring Security, MySQL database, and Thymeleaf. Then in the next video, I will show you how to implement the role-based authorization. You can find the video link in the description. First, let's create a new Spring Boot application. So we can type Spring Initializer. Let's go to the first link. Then here let's select Maven. Let's select the latest version of Spring Boot. Then let's provide the group. So here we can type com.bmt, for example. Let's provide the name of the application. We can call it My Store. Then let's add the dependencies. So the first dependency is Spring Web. Then we will connect to MySQL, so we need the MySQL driver. Also, we will connect to the database using Spring JPA. So here let's type JPA and let's add this dependency. And to validate the submitted data, we need the validation dependency. Then we need Thymeleaf. And finally, we need Spring Security. Now let's download the application. So I will save it on the desktop. Now we need to extract this zip file and we need to open it using an IDE. I will open it using Eclipse. Then we need to configure the application to connect to the database. So let's go to the resources folder. And let's open this file application.properties. Then we need to add these properties. So this is the driver name. This is the URL of the database. So we will connect to a database called DB1. Of course, you can choose any name. Then this is the username. I don't have any password. And we can use this optional property. So it allows us to display the SQL queries on the console. And using this property, we will update the database each time we update our entity models. So now we need to create this database. So here I will use example and I can connect to MySQL using phpMyAdmin. Then let's create a new database. And let's call it DB1. Now let's create a new controller. So let's add a new class. And let's create it in the controllers package. Let's call it home controller. So this is a controller. We need to annotate it with the controller annotation. Then let's define two routes. So this is the root route. And it will be accessible using the get method. And it will return the index page. So later we need to create the file index.html. Then here we have the /contact route. It will be accessible using the get method and it will return the file contact.html that we need to create. Let's import this annotation. Then let's create the file index.html. We need to create it in the templates folder. So I will create this file using Bootstrap. So let's go to the browser. And here we can type Bootstrap. Let's go to the first link. Then docs. And let's copy this source code that includes Bootstrap CSS and JavaScript from the CDN. Let's paste it here. Let's change the title of the window. So here we can write Best Store, for example. And let's display the title of the page into a container. Then let's create the file contact.html. Let's copy the source code from index.html. Let's delete the h1 element And let's replace it with this div that contains the title contact, and here we have a link that will take us to the root of the application. Now let's save all the files and let's run the application. So let's go to the main file, which is my store application that contains the main method. Then let's make a right click, then run as, then Java application. So now the application is running correctly, and here we can see that we have this password. So this password corresponds to the username user. And also we can see that the application is running at this port number. Now let's go to the browser. And here let's type localhost :8080. But here we can see that we are redirected to the login page. This is because by default all the routes are protected and we need to change this configuration. So let's stop the application and let's create a new class that allows us to configure the application. Let's create it in the package config. And let's call it security-config. So this class will be used to configure the security of the application. So we need to annotate it with two annotations, which are configuration and enable web security. Let's import these two annotations. Then let's register a new bean that allows us to configure the security filter chain. So we can register a bean of type security filter chain, and we can define these security rules. So the URL / will be accessible to any user, the URL / contact will be public, any URL that starts with /store will be public, the URL / register / login and /logout will be public, and any other URL requires the user authentication. Also, we need to enable the login and the logout functionalities. So after the successful user authentication, we will redirect the user to the /URL. And after the successful user logout, we will redirect the user to this URL. Let's import the required packages. Let's save the files and let's run the application again. Now the application is running correctly, so let's go to the root URL. And now we can access to this page. So now let's add the Navbar. So we can go back to the documentation website of Bootstrap. And under Components, let's click on Navbar. Then let's copy the source code that allows us to obtain this Navbar. Let's paste it in the index page. So let's paste it after the body. Then here let's write the name of the application. We can write best store, for example. The URL will be /. Then here we have the home item and the link item, and also we have other items. So we can keep the home item. Let's change the URL. We don't need this attribute, so we can delete it. We can delete the active class and let's replace it with text dark. Then we can rename this item. So here we can write contact. Let's change the URL. So it will be /contact. And here let's add text dark. Then let's delete this drop-down list. So we can delete this li element. We don't need this item as well, so we can delete it. And let's delete this form. So after this UL element, we can create another UL element that allows us to display the register and the login buttons. So in this UL element, we can see that we have the register button that will take us to /register, and we have the login button that will take us to /login. Now let's save the file and let's restart the application. Let's refresh the page. And we obtain this Navbar, so we can improve it a little bit by adding a bottom border and by adding some space at the left and at the right. So just here in the nav element, we can add this bootstrap class, border bottom, and we can use container instead of container fluid. Let's save the file and let's restart the application. Let's refresh the page. So here we can see that we have some space at the left and at the right, and we have this border. Now let's click on login and we obtain this login form. So the username by default is user and the password is already displayed on the console, so we can copy it from here. Then let's click on sign in. So now we are authenticated correctly, and to log out, just here we can write /logout and we obtain this page, so we can click on this button. And now we are logged out successfully. Now I will show you how to register users. So first we need to create a new entity model. So let's create a new class. And let's create it in the models package. Let's call it app user. So we can call it user, but later we will use a class called user defined by Spring Security. So to get rid of any confusion, we can call this class app user. Then we need to add two annotations. So we need to add entity and table that allows us to define the name of the table in the database. So we will call the table users. Let's import the missing package. Then let's define the different fields of this class. So we need the ID, which is the primary key, and it is auto-incremental. We need the first name, the last name, the email that will be the unique identifier of the user. So we can define the username, but in this video I will show you how to authenticate the users by email and by password. So the email should be unique. Then we have the phone number, the address, the password, and to implement the role-based authorization we need to define the user role. Then we have created at. Then let's create the getters and setters. Then let's create a repository that allows us to read the users from the database. So let's create a new interface. So here we need to create an interface and let's create it in the repositories package. Let's call it app user repository. So this interface extends the JPA repository. Then let's define a new method. So we can create the method find by email that allows us to find a user by his email address. So we don't need to implement this interface because it will be implemented by Spring JPA. To allow Spring Security to find the users in the database, we need to register a new service that implements the user details serves interface. So now let's create a new class. And let's create it in the services package. Let's call it app user service. Then let's register this class. So we need to annotate it with the service annotation. So this class should implement the user details service interface. Then let's implement the method of this interface. In our case, we will authenticate users by email. So let's change the name of this parameter and let's call it email. Then we need to find the users in the database. So we can use our repository, which is app user repository, so we can request it from the application. Then we need to find the user having this email address. So we can call a repo, which is our repository.findByEmail, and this is the email address, and then we will obtain a user which is of type appUser. Then let's check if we found a user having this email address or not. So if appUser is not null, this means that we found a user having this email address. In this case, we can create a Spring user which is equal to user.withUsername. This is the email address which is considered as the username by Spring Security, and then we will set the user password, we will set the user role, and then we will create this Spring user and we will return it. Let's import the missing package. So in our case, we will encrypt the user password in the database. That's why we need to register a bean of type password encoder that allows Spring Security to check if the user password is valid or not. So we can go to security config, and here let's create a new bean. So we can register a bean of type password encoder, which is a bcrypt password encoder. Now we need to create a new model that allows us to read the submitted data of the register form. So let's create it in the models package. And let's call it register.dtu. Then let's create the different fields of this class. So we need the first name which is required, we need the last name which is required, we need the email address which is required, and it should have the email address format. Then we have the phone number which is optional, we have the address which is optional, we have the password that should be at least 6 characters, and if we don't respect this constraint, then we can display this error message. Then here we have the confirm password. Then let's create the getters and setters. Now let's save all the files. And let's create a new controller that allows us to register users. So let's create it in the controllers package. But here we can see that I call this package controller. I will just rename it. And let's call it controllers. Now let's create a new controller. And let's call it account controller. So this is a controller, so we need to annotate it with the controller annotation. Then we need to request the appUser repository from the application. So just here we can use autowired. Then let's create a new route that allows us to display the register form. So we can create the route /register that will be accessible using the get method. Here we have the register method that requires a model that allows us to send data to the page. So in this model, we will add an object of type register.dto that we need to associate to the register form. Now let's create the page register.html. So let's create it in the templates folder. Then let's copy the source code from the file contact.html. Then let's delete this div and let's replace it with a bootstrap row. So in this row, we have one column that will be displayed in the center of the page, and we have a rounded border. Then we have the title of the page, which is register. Then we have this horizontal separator. Then we need to create our form. So this form will be submitted using the post method, and it will be associated to the register.dto model that we defined in the controller. So here we can see that we have this register.dto model. Then we have this hidden input field. So it is very required because it contains the CSRF protection token. But here we can see that we have several warnings. So we have undefined attribute name th object. This is because this is a Thymeleaf attribute. And to get rid of this warning, we can just, in the HTML tag, we can add the following attribute. And now we don't have the warnings anymore. So now let's create the first field of this form. So we can create this div, which is a bootstrap row. We have a label with the text first name, which is required. Then we have this input field that is associated to the first name field of a registered DTO. Then we have this paragraph that will be displayed only if we have errors related to the first name. So the text of this paragraph will be displayed using the red color. And we will display the errors related to the first name field of the registered DTO model. Then let's create the other fields of the form. So we can create this row that allows us to display the last name, and here we have this input field that is associated to the last name field of registered DTO. Then here we have another row for the email address, and we have this input field that is associated to the email field of registered DTO. Then we have another row for the phone number. We have this row for the address. Then we have this row for the password. So here we can see that the password is of type password. Like this, the content of the password field will be hidden. Then we have another row for the confirm password. So the input field is also of type password. Then let's create the submit button of this form. So we can create this row that contains the submit button. So here we can see that the type of this button is submit. So it allows us to submit the form. And we have the cancel button that will take us to the root URL of our application. Now let's save all the files. Let's restart the application. So here we can see that we have a new table called users that is created in the database. Let's refresh the page. And let's click on a register. And we obtain this register form. Now let's create a new route that allows us to handle the submitted register form. So let's go to account controller and let's create a new route. So we can create the route /register that will be accessible using the HTTP post method. And in the register method, we have the model that allows us to send data to the page. Then we have the registered DTO model that is the submitted data of the form. So we will read it from the form and we will validate it. And then the validation result will be available in this object. So first let's check if the password is the same as the confirm password or not. So if the submitted password of registered DTO is not equal to the confirmed password, in this case we can add an error to this object, which is of type field error. So it will be an error related to this model. So we have here registered DTO and the name of the field is confirm password. So the error message will be password and confirm password do not match. Then we need to check if the submitted email address is already used or not. So we can check if we have a user having this submitted email address. If app user is not null, this means that the email address is already used. In this case, we can add an error to the result, which is this object. So it will be related to the email field of a registered DTO, and the error message will be email address is already used. So if we have any validation error, then we will return the page without creating the user account. Otherwise, we need to create the user account. So we can add this try catch block. In the try block, we will create the user account. And if we have any exception, then we will add an error to the result. And you can associate this error to any field. We can associate it to the first name, for example. And you can display the error message of the exception. Now in the try block, we need to create the user account. First, we need to create this object, which is of type bcrypt password encoder that allows us to encode the user password. Then we can create this new user, so it is of type app user, and we will set the first name, last name, email, phone, and address using the submitted data which is available in a registered DTO. By default, the user role will be client. Then we can set the date of creating this user account to the current date, and the password will be the encoded value of the submitted password. Then we will create the new user account. Then we need to clear the register form, so we can add an empty register DTO object to the model. Also, we need to display a success message, so we need to add this variable success to the model, and its value will be true. So we can copy this statement from here, and let's add it to the first method. But here in the first method, when we display an empty register form, we will set success to false. Now let's display a success message if success is equal to true. So let's go to the register page, and after the title of the page, after this horizontal separator, we can check if success is equal to true or not. So if success is true, then we will display this div, which is a bootstrap alert of type success. This is the success message, and here we have a link that allows the user to log in. Now let's save all the files, and let's restart the application. Let's click on a register, and let's submit the form. So here we can see that we have these validation errors. Now let's fill the form. So I will send the first name, the last name, and the email address. Let's click on submit. So here we did not lose the submitted data, but we still have a validation error with the password. So let's provide the password and the confirm password. Then submit. So here we can see that we have this success message and the form is clear now. Let's go to the database. Let's click on this database. Then let's click on this users table. And we can see that we have this new user. And by default, the user role is client. Also, we can see that the password is encrypted. Now let's log in using the created account. So let's click on login and let's fill the form. Then sign in. And because we are authenticated successfully, we can see that we are redirected to the home page. But here it is not clear if the user is authenticated successfully because we still have these two buttons. So now we need to update this navbar. If the user is authenticated, we will display a drop-down list plus a logout button. But if the user is not authenticated, we will display these two buttons. So let's go to the index page. And we need to display the register button and the login button only if the user is not authenticated. So we need to display this UL element if the user is not authenticated. So just here, we can add SecUauthorize, which is a Thymeleaf attribute, and we will display this UL element if the user is not authenticated. So to get rid of this warning, just here in the HTML tag, we need to add these attributes. So now we don't have the warning anymore. So if the user is not authenticated, we will display this UL element, but if the user is authenticated, we need to display a drop-down list. So just here, we can add this UL element that will be displayed only if the user is authenticated. So here we have this drop-down list that contains these two items. Also, if the user is authenticated, we need to display the logout button. So we can add this form only if the user is authenticated. So this form will be submitted using the post method to this URL /logout. And here we have this input field which is hidden that contains the CSRF protection token. Then we have the logout button which is displayed using the red color. Now let's save the file and let's restart the application. Now let's click on login and let's fill the form. So now because we are authenticated successfully, we can see that we have this drop-down list and we have this logout button. Let's click on logout and now we have these two buttons. In the next video, I will show you how to create a custom login page and how to implement the role-based authorization. You can find the video link in the description.